Okay, so ready to dive into another one? Today, well, actually, someone sent this to us. It's the COPC CX Standard version 7.0 for customer operations management. And I mean, this thing, it's massive. So we're gonna try to extract the really crucial knowledge about how organizations think about how they manage and really strive for excellence in their customer experience operations. It's like getting a sneak peek behind the scenes, right, at how companies really aim for that gold standard of customer service across all the ways that we might interact with them as customers.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting about this is that it's not just, someone's opinion. It's a really detailed management system and a quality framework.
Hmm.
And, while it initially started with a focus on call centers, it's really expanded. It's grown to encompass all the different channels that a customer might use to interact with the company. So whether you're interested in like the nitty-gritty of how service providers are evaluated, or, maybe you just want to get a better understanding of the principles behind really efficient, really effective customer service, I think this deep dive will offer some really valuable insights.
Okay, so let's start big picture here. What is the fundamental aim of this whole standard? Like, what are organizations really hoping to achieve by adopting this?
So the COPC standard, it's all about helping organizations make, significant improvements in their customer experience. But it's more than just that. It's also about boosting their revenue, right? Improving the quality and effectiveness of their service. And, believe it or not, actually reducing their costs at the same time. It's about building a lasting capability for continuous improvement. It's all about getting better all the time.
Okay, now as we kind of get into the specifics here, I noticed this term PSIC pops up quite a bit. What exactly does PSC stand for in the context of this standard?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a key term to understand from the get-go. So PSIC, it stands for Provider of Integral Services to Customers. And this can be, a couple of different things. It could be an internal service provider, meaning a department or a team within a company that's providing services to other parts of that same company. Or it can be an external vendor, what they call an EPSIC, which is basically a company that's been hired by another company, a client contractor they call it, to serve their customers. And they refer to those customers as clients. And it's interesting because clients, that's a pretty broad term in this context. It includes end users like you and me, other businesses, and even those different distribution channels that get products and services out there. So, understanding these different roles is really important for seeing how the standard is actually put into practice.
Got it. So it's really anyone, directly delivering that service, whether they're inside or outside the main company. Now, another concept that seems super important in this document is the service journey. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that actually involves for the customer?
Yeah, absolutely. The service journey, it's basically the complete path that a customer takes from the moment they first have an issue or a need,
Hmm.
all the way until that issue is resolved or that need is met. And this includes, all the possible ways they might interact with the company, all the different contact channels, any company resources they use, the whole thing. And the standard, it really emphasizes understanding and optimizing those experiences from beginning to end, from the customer's perspective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, seeing things through the customer's eyes and how they're going through that whole process, across all those different touch points. Now, the document also, it draws a distinction between what it calls digital assistance channels and person-assisted channels. What's the core difference between those two, and why does standard even bother to make that distinction, do you think?
Well, it's actually pretty insightful because it recognizes how many different ways customers seek support these days. So digital assistance channels, those are all the self-service options where you can, get help without actually talking to a live person. So, think of things like a company's website, maybe a mobile app with a help section, those automated chatbots that you see popping up everywhere, or even, the interactive voice response system that you get when you call a company. Person-assisted channels, on the other hand, those involve, getting help directly from a real person, whether that's over the phone, through email, live chat with an agent, social media messaging, even in-person service at a physical store. And the reason this distinction is so important is because the standard, it provides specific guidance and performance metrics for managing each of these types of channels effectively.
Okay, so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to managing customer contact then. Now, with all this detail, with all these, different categories and types of channels and everything, why should they actually bother to invest the time and the effort in adopting this COPC standard? What are the tangible benefits for them?
Well, if you think about it, leading companies all over the world use this standard because it's been shown to work. It actually gets results. Organizations that have implemented it have reported seeing significant improvements in some really key areas. Things like better customer experience ratings, increased revenue, the quality of their service goes up. And what's really important, a lot of times they see a reduction in their operating costs. And this latest version, version 7.0, it's particularly important because it broadens the scope of the standard to include all those different digital and person-assisted channels that we were just talking about. So it gives organizations a really comprehensive toolkit for improving their customer interactions across the board. And for companies that offer support through multiple channels, which is pretty much everyone these days, it provides a framework for ensuring a consistent and positive customer experience regardless of how the customer reaches out.
Yeah, that's a really compelling set of advantages there. The standard also, it goes into how service, quality, revenue, and cost, they're all kind of interconnected. It suggests that they don't necessarily have to be competing priorities. How does the COPC framework see these elements all working together?
That's a really great point. And what's so fascinating about it is how the standard really reframes what a lot of people think of as trade-offs, So service, in this context, it means how easy and how efficient it is for the customer to get their issue resolved and how quickly the company takes action. Quality, on the other hand, that focuses on the accuracy of the information that the customer receives and whether their problem is actually resolved correctly the first time they contact the company. And the principle behind the standard is that by optimizing your processes, by making sure your staff are well-trained and that they have the tools they need, by using the right technology, you can actually drive revenue and reduce costs at the same time. And this happens because efficient and high-quality service, well, it leads to happier customers. And happier customers are more likely to come back, they're more loyal, and they're less likely to need help over and over again, which saves the company money in the long run. It's all about creating this positive cycle, where efficiency and customer satisfaction, they kind of reinforce each other.
That makes a ton of sense. Effective and efficient service, well, that makes customers happy, which boosts revenue and reduces those costly follow-up interactions. So who typically uses this standard? Is it, specific to certain industries or certain types of operations?
That's a great question, and it really gets at how versatile this standard is. It's used by a surprisingly diverse range of operations. This includes your more traditional, what we think of as, call centers, both inbound and outbound customer contact operations, but it also includes BPOs. Those business process outsourcing organizations that handle huge volumes of customer interactions for other companies, and even, retail stores, physical customer-facing locations, field service operations where technicians have to go out to a customer site. So, it's used in all sorts of different customer service environments.
Wow, that's really widespread. Where did this whole COPC standard originate? What was the driving force behind it being created in the first place?
Here's what's so interesting about it. The COPC standard, it wasn't, developed in some academic ivory tower. It actually came about through collaboration between some major tech companies like Microsoft, Compaq, Intel, Novell, Dell. These were big players. And they were not only outsourcing their customer contact operations, but they were also running their own, large-scale support centers. And what they realized was that there was a real lack of common, well-defined operational guidelines and best practices in the industry. So they came together with this shared goal of driving improvement and establishing, a real benchmark for quality and this real-world foundation, developed by people who are actually on the front lines of customer service. That's what gives the standard so much credibility.
That's fascinating. It was born out of a real need, a practical need. Now, let's talk about the structure of the standard a little bit. How is all this guidance organized within the document?
All right, let's unpack that a little bit. So the standard is structured into several main categories, right? And these categories, they cover the essential elements of managing, any customer-facing operation. So you got leadership and planning, which focuses on setting the strategic direction, defining those goals. Then you've got a huge section on processes, which details how the actual work of serving customers should be done, the step-by-step. Then there's human resources, a really critical category. This one covers all aspects of managing the people who actually interact with the customers. And then finally, there's results, which, as you might expect, focuses on measuring performance and outcomes. So, within that processes category, you'll find guidance on things like understanding customer needs, defining those core service delivery processes, they call them PCRCs, and managing the workforce, IT service management, quality assurance, knowledge management for those customer service agents, even how to manage vendor relationships. And the human resources section is equally comprehensive.
It covers everything from defining job roles all the way to recruitment and training programs, performance management, even strategies for reducing employee turnover and absenteeism, all of which, can have a big impact on the customer experience.
Yeah, it sounds like a really, really thorough approach, touching on all the, the essential pieces of a customer-facing organization. Now, one thing that really stood out to me was this phrase, objective measurements. Why is having this, objective data, why is that such a central requirement in this standard?
That's a fantastic question, and it gets at the heart of what this standard is all about. See, a core principle of the COPC CX Standard is the need for objective measurements for pretty much every activity that impacts customers. For an organization to become certified, they have to show that they not only set clear performance targets, ones that can be measured, but they also have to show that they're consistently meeting or exceeding a good portion of those targets, and that they're actively using data to improve their performance all the time. So it's all about moving away from, subjective opinions and basing your decisions on solid, concrete data.
So it's not enough to just say you're doing well. You've got to prove it with the numbers. Now, the document, it also goes into how organizations can actually put a dollar value, how they can quantify the benefits they get from using the standard. How does a company go about putting an actual financial value on those improvements?
Well, the interesting thing here is that the standard, it actually provides guidance on how to calculate those financial returns. And this involves looking at things like improvements in service quality, right? Like, are they seeing an increase in first contact resolution rates? Are they seeing a decrease in what's called the cost of poor quality?
Right.
Things like issuing refunds or having to redo work because of errors. And it also looks at improvements in efficiency, like a reduction in the average time it takes to handle a customer interaction, or better utilization of their workforce. And they even consider the cost savings that come from reducing the overall volume of customer contacts, by making self-service options better, or by fixing the root causes of why customers are reaching out for help in the first place.
Yeah, that's incredibly valuable, being able to take those improvements in the customer experience and turn them into, real financial benefits that everyone in the organization can understand. One area the standard seems to really emphasize is the high cost of employee turnover. Why is that such a significant concern within this framework?
Well, it all goes back to the fact that the cost of personnel, salaries and benefits, it represents a huge chunk of the operating expenses in customer service, often as much as 70% to 80% of the total cost. So employee engagement and retention, they become absolutely critical. The standard highlights how good recruitment processes can really lower those turnover rates. And then it goes on to break down all the different costs that are associated with replacing employees. The cost of training new hires, the lost productivity while those new hires are getting up to speed, losing experienced agents and constantly having to train new ones. It's a huge financial drain. And it can impact the consistency and quality of service the customers receive.
It really does, constantly losing those experienced staff and having to train new people over and over again. It's a drain in every way.
Now, beyond just those direct financial benefits, those cost savings, does the standard recognize any other benefits, maybe some less tangible ones, of adopting its principles?
Absolutely. Beyond the hard numbers, the standard acknowledges some really important intangible benefits, things like increased customer loyalty, which might be harder to measure in the short term, but it has huge value in the long run. It also talks about the benefit of being able to identify problem areas in other parts of the organization. By looking at why customers are contacting support, companies can often find issues with their products, their processes, other services, and they can fix those things proactively. So the customer contact center, it can actually be like an early warning system for the whole company. That's interesting. So it's providing feedback that benefits the entire organization. Now, looking ahead, the standard mentions this idea of using what it calls leading outcome measurements. What's the significance of having this, this forward-looking perspective?
Well, it really emphasizes the importance of being strategic and forward-thinking when it comes to customer operations. It's not just about looking at how you performed in the past, but it's about identifying the things that are going to predict future success. And it allows organizations to adjust their strategies, adjust their operations to stay ahead of the curve and keep improving the customer experience.
It's like anticipating those future needs and those challenges rather than just reacting to what's already happened. Now, let's get into some of the, the specific terms that are used in the standard. The outline mentioned PCRCs and PCAs. Can you break down what those actually are and why they're important within this whole framework?
Absolutely. Let's clarify those. So PCRCs, that stands for Customer-Related Core Processes. And these are essentially the most important steps in actually delivering that service to the customer, right? The core activities that have a direct impact on their experience. So think of things like handling a customer inquiry, processing an order, resolving a technical issue, those kinds of things. PCAs, on the other hand, those are key support processes. And these are all the activities that don't directly involve interacting with the customer. But they're essential for making sure those PCRCs can work properly. So things like managing the IT systems that those agents use, keeping the knowledge base up to date, forecasting call volumes to make sure there's enough staff on hand. And the standard, it actually outlines specific metrics for both PCRCs and PCAs. And you can find a detailed list of those in the annexes of the document. For example, Annex 1, it provides metrics for both person-assisted and digital channels, covering things like the speed of service, the quality of the interaction, accuracy, whether there are any critical errors, sales performance, operational efficiency, all of that. Annex 2, that one focuses on those key support processes, like the availability and reliability of the telecommunication systems, IT systems, the timeliness and accuracy of the knowledge management and how well they're doing with forecasting and real-time resource management.
So you can't really have those efficient and effective, customer-facing processes without having all the right stuff in place behind the scenes. And Annex 3, that seems pretty important too. What does that one cover?
Yeah, Annex 3 is really crucial for understanding the big picture, the business impact. It defines those key metrics for measuring the overall effect of how an organization is handling its customers across all those different service channels. So it looks at things like overall customer satisfaction levels, how much effort the customer has to put in to get their issue resolved. And it also looks at the total cost of providing service across all those channels. So it gives you a really holistic view of performance and efficiency.
It's about connecting the quality of the customer experience to the bottom line. Now, for an organization to be considered, truly high-performing under this standard, there's a mention of this 50-75 rule. What does that benchmark actually mean?
That's a really important indicator of how mature an organization is when it comes to customer operations. So for an organization to be recognized as high-performing under this standard, they have to consistently meet or exceed their performance targets for at least 50% of all the required metrics. But it doesn't stop there. They also have to demonstrate that they're improving over time. So they need to show a trend of sustained improvement in a total of 75% of those metrics. And this applies across all the different service locations and the types of services they offer.
So it's not just about hitting a few targets. It's about, continuously getting better. And for organizations that want that, official recognition for following the standard, there's a certification process, right? What does that involve?
Yeah, for organizations that want that, stamp of approval, the standard lays out a certification process. It typically involves an initial application where the organization has to provide information about their operations and how they align with the standard. And then there's a pretty thorough on-site audit that's conducted by COPC Inc., or one of their authorized partners. And what's interesting is that some companies that rely heavily on outsourced customer service, they actually require their service providers to achieve COPC certification as a way to make sure that they're getting a consistently high level of performance.
So in some cases, it's like a requirement to do business. Now, finally, given the complexity of all this, of managing these customer operations, there must be a very, specific vocabulary that's used in this whole field. The outline mentioned that there's a pretty extensive glossary of terms. What kinds of things are defined there?
Yeah, absolutely. To make sure everyone's speaking the same language, and that there's a common understanding across the industry, the document has a really detailed glossary. And you'll find definitions for key terms like adherence to schedule, which measures how well agents stick to their planned work times. You've got average handle time. That's the average length of a customer interaction from start to finish. First contact resolution. That's the ability to resolve a customer's issue on that very first contact. And of course, service level agreement. Those agreed upon performance targets between a service provider and their client, or even between internal departments. So, understanding this common language, it's essential for anyone working in or with customer operations. It helps make sure everyone's on the same page.
Well, this has been this deep dive into the COPC CX Standard version 7.0. It's been really, really eye-opening. It's a really rigorous and well thought out approach to this whole, idea of managing customer operations.
Yeah, I think the key takeaways are that this standard, it gives you this, really comprehensive framework. And it's about more than just those individual customer interactions. It's about understanding and continuously improving the entire customer journey, those support processes behind it. developing and managing the people involved, and ultimately measuring the results. That focus on data, that commitment to continuous improvement, and recognizing how service quality, revenue, and costs are all tied together. It provides a really valuable way to understand how organizations are trying to deliver those exceptional customer experiences while still running their operations efficiently.
That's a fantastic summary of, a pretty complex standard. And it leads to a really interesting thought, right? Given all these specific metrics and these, complex management systems that are in this standard, it makes you wonder how consistently are all those companies that we interact with every day, how are they actually applying these principles and what kinds of, clues, maybe subtle, maybe not so subtle, can we pick up on in our own experiences as customers that might indicate how committed they really are to this framework. It's a really powerful way to think about the world of customer service that we all experience on a daily basis. So yeah, something to keep in mind the next time you're interacting with any company, really.